Hi, my name is Johnny, and I'm a believer who struggles with alcoholism. Well, it's no surprise now that John and Cheryl Baker, the founders of Celebrate Recovery, are my parents. Now, I usually try to keep this as quiet as possible, but I'm going to be talking about them a lot this morning, so I'll get that right out in the open. As long as I can remember, I've had a relationship with God. As a preschooler, I heard stories about Jesus and how much he loved me. I was instantly drawn to Jesus and wanted to learn more and more about him. I asked my parents to bring me back on Sunday so I could hear more stories. As I got older, I remained in youth group activities, but my former church taught a legalistic way to approach God. This fed my already developed guilty conscience. Even as a young kid, I would lie awake at nights feeling guilty. I had an advanced ability to worry too. So as I began to learn that I would need to earn God's love, I had no idea how I would do that. But on top of my guilt and worry, I've always had a need to go against the grain. I've always wanted to be the bad boy. This desire to rebel, coupled with my need to do the right thing, made things very uncomfortable for me. When I was 14, my parents separated, and I found the perfect excuse to act out. No one would blame me for rebelling now. In fact, they would expect it. Among my friends, a separation was worth at least a few wild parties. I tried pot for the first time and began having sex with my girlfriend. It was a wild freshman year. Fortunately, after 13 months, my parents reconciled, and my mom, my sister, and I began attending Saddleback Church. It was around this time that my dad told me he was an alcoholic. At first, I didn't believe him. I told him I really didn't think he was, and I had seen him drink a lot, but I couldn't remember ever really seeing him drunk. He assured me he was, and then he did something extraordinary. He apologized. He said he was sorry for the drinking and the separation. Wow. He said that he and my mom were going to renew their marriage vows, and he asked me for my forgiveness. I forgave him immediately. When my parents began Celebrate Recovery, I was one of the first participants. My dad and I would take the church van and load it up with the chairs and the sound equipment and drive over to Charter Hospital. We didn't have a church building yet, so we had Celebrate Recovery there. I began leading the teen group. We didn't have Life Hurts, God Heals then. We had sit around and complain about your parents. Some of you have been in that group. Hey, we were teenagers, and although my parents were back together, they still cramped my style. I got deeply involved with the youth ministry here at Saddleback and did classes 101 through 301 with my family. I found a home here and was able to experience the grace of Jesus Christ. Soon, my old need to rebel kicked in, and I found my first drug of choice, Camel cigarettes. In the early days of Celebrate Recovery, we had people staying at our house all the time. One of these guys smoked, and I began stealing cigarettes from him. I know he knew about it, but he never told my parents. This quickly led to a pack-a-day habit that stayed with me for years. Here I was, a leader of the youth group, the leader of the teen group at Celebrate Recovery, and secretly smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I know that smoking wasn't something I should be doing in these roles, but that only made it more appealing. In the beginning, having it as a secret made it more exciting. I began lying to cover it up, and I found out quickly I had a gift for it. I lied on the spot, and I did it so well I actually began to believe my own lies. This was a pattern I would frequently repeat. I know I wasn't actually fooling anyone with my lies, but I gave it my best shot. In the youth group and at school, I was involved in drama classes. I loved being on stage and acting. My friend Eddie and I became known as the skit guys here at Saddleback because we would do skits during our services. I did my first step study with Eddie during this time. The books didn't look like they do today, but they weren't even published yet, but they had the same principles and questions that they do today. I went through the steps as a codependent. I was 16 and I was determined that I would never struggle with alcohol. On stage, I loved making people laugh. So when I graduated from high school, I went to junior college and stayed involved in acting. I decided to move to LA and try my hand in Hollywood. I was 21 and on my own for the first time. Now that can be a dangerous combination. My best friend and I moved to Westwood right next to UCLA. Up to then, I'd had a drink or two at a party, but I wouldn't consider myself a drinker. But we were in walking distance of 4 bars, and I began to take full advantage of not having to drive home. Soon I was going to the bars most nights of the week, sometimes with my friends, sometimes alone. My friend Mark didn't drink, and he took good care of me when I came home too drunk. He'd always make sure that we made it home okay and that we didn't get into too much trouble while we were out. I'm sure he saved me on multiple occasions. When I wasn't drinking, I was trying to get acting jobs. I had an agent and went on some auditions, but nothing ever came of it. I never even had a call back. And within that first year of trying, I realized that I wasn't cut out for it. For the first time in my life, I started to feel depressed. I began drinking more and more, and soon I was drinking every night. I remember one night Mark came back to our apartment, and I was passed out with a bottle in my hand. I say I remember it, but really what I remember is Mark telling me about it. At this time, I would not have said that I was an alcoholic. I was 21 and having fun. I was just doing what I was supposed to do, right? There was a small problem, though. I was still coming home every weekend and volunteering here at church. I was still leading 2 different lives. At church, I was the good boy raised up in the church. Out in the world, though, I was a totally different person. There were only a few people who knew both sides of me because I tried to keep my lives as separate as possible. During this time, I was still doing skits in church. One of my biggest sources of shame is that I would do skits on the weekend and then go back to LA and drink. I was a total hypocrite. Because I was so ashamed of my actions, I tried many times to stop drinking on my own. I went to a camp with the college group here and made a pact with one of my drinking buddies that we would stop drinking together. Like all of these pacts, they lasted about a week and we were right back at it. I still would not have considered myself an alcoholic. It was around this time that I met Jenny. Jenny and I began dating, and I could tell she would not be interested in drinking Johnny. I did all I could to put that side of me away while we were together and play it down as much as possible. I told her that I rarely drank, and when I did, it was just a drink or two. Now, this time, I couldn't tell you how long it had been since I had a drink or two, but that's the standard answer. Have anything to drink tonight, son? Just a drink or two, officer. I knew I would have to keep the extent of my drinking a secret, even from her, even when she became my fiance. In December of 1999, I went to a friend's house to celebrate my birthday. It was a few days before Christmas, and we began to have a few drinks. At 3:30 in the morning, I left to make the drive home. It's about half a mile from door to door. And I made it almost all the way home. The problem is, at 3:30 in the morning, a few days before Christmas, I was the only car on the road that wasn't a police car. I was pulled over, given the field sobriety test, and failed. I told the officer that drove me to jail that my fiance would break up with me when she learned I'd been arrested for DUI. I thought, there's no way she'll put up with that. Thankfully, I was wrong about that. She was gracious and forgiving and let me know she still loved me. But because of my DUI, I never drank again. Yeah, right. I wish I could say that was the case, but I was able to justify my actions in many ways. I didn't have a problem with alcohol, I just needed to be smarter about driving after I drank. I will say this, I never got behind the wheel of a car after driving again, after drinking again, but I certainly did drink again. By the way, I used my one phone call to get to my dad to help get me out of jail. I have never been so nervous or so ashamed in my life. After all, I wasn't only calling my dad, I was also calling the pastor and founder of Celebrate Recovery. If any of you know my dad, though, you know he can seem pretty intimidating, but he's actually a very tender and gentle man. And that's who he was with me. He didn't lecture me. He told me he loved me, and I probably needed to take a look at my actions and see why I made the choices I made. But he left the decision up to me. Jenny and I got married in May of 2000, and we just celebrated our 6th wedding anniversary. I'm truly blessed, and I consider myself very lucky that she is still in my life. When we first got married, we rarely had alcohol in the house. I would sometimes convince her that we should have some drinks or needed some kind of alcohol to cook with, and every once in a while she would agree. So I could have a few drinks. But Jenny never drank. It just isn't something she was ever interested in. I never got drunk in front of Jenny, but every once in a while I'd have a few beers, and she'd say, "Now, Johnny, do you think maybe you should slow down?" And I'd look at her and I'd say, "Honey, I don't want you to worry. I don't have a problem with alcohol. I don't drink during the day when I'm at work. I just like the taste of beer, and I can quit whenever I want." I heard that somewhere before, and it sounded good to me. One night, though, I went to the kitchen while she was asleep and had a few drinks before going back to bed. Even after rinsing with mouthwash, she could still smell the alcohol in my breath. This was the first time I drank behind her back. It wouldn't be the last. I worked nights as a waiter and had trouble sleeping after a busy shift. I began drinking as a way to fall asleep. I convinced myself that that was the only way I could sleep. It's amazing how fast you can convince yourselves of the things you truly want to believe. I came up with all kinds of ways to disguise my drinking from Jenny. Usually I'd get home as she was ready to go to bed, and I would sneak some beer or some other alcohol in the house. And I began to keep non-alcoholic beer in the refrigerator. I'd tell her I was going to watch TV and have one of those. That way I could drink as much beer as I'd want, and she'd think the smell was really from the non-alcoholic one. I kept this going for quite some time. I was finally aware that my drinking was a problem when Jenny got pregnant with our first daughter. It was harder and harder for me to enjoy drinking as I began thinking about impending fatherhood. I would think, I don't want my kids to see me drink the way I saw my dad drink. But what really got me, though, was the thought that if Jenny went into labor at night after I began drinking, I wouldn't be able to drive her to the hospital. My facade would be up. Instead, I decided I needed to stop drinking. I finally accepted the fact I was an alcoholic, and it was time to give it up. Now, at the time, I thought I'd become sober, but really what I was a dry drunk. When Maggie was born, it had been about 8 months since my last drink, but I hadn't been going to meetings or working the program. Thankfully, I was able to draw on my past step study experiences and was able to apply the principles as I dried up. I didn't have accountability, though, and although I didn't drink anymore, I found myself thinking about drinking every day. When Maggie wouldn't sleep or cried a lot, which I've come to realize newborns do quite well, I'd find myself fantasize about being able to escape through drinking. I knew it was time for me to get involved in the program here at Celebrate Recovery to help me truly live and enjoy my sobriety. I'm doing my best to work the program every day now. I found a sponsor, and in this July, I started a Tuesday morning step study. I find that I need to remind myself daily that God is in control, and it is only through Him that I can remain sober. I now have over 3 years of sobriety and can thankfully say that I no longer think about drinking every day. There are still days when things get tough and I feel overwhelmed, but I don't think of drinking as a coping mechanism anymore, and I no longer fantasize about drinking. In the beginning of my sobriety, I thought that maybe, someday, I'd be able to drink again. I now know that doing so would mean the end of so many things I hold dear. Friday nights have become one of the highlights of my week. Every week, we say that Celebrate Recovery is the best place to be on a Friday night. I couldn't agree more. I love getting a chance to worship and really celebrate my recovery. I love that I don't have to hide who I am here. I can go to my group and share openly without any fear of being judged. I no longer have to keep secrets. Now I can be completely honest with everyone around me. I'm no longer one person at church and another at home. I'm just me, banged up and imperfect, but because of the work of Jesus, I'm forgiven and getting better each day. I now try to live my life by 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. To make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. My second daughter, Chloe, was born in March, and I love knowing that as long as I keep working this program, she and her big sister will never see me drink. Because I am an adult child of an alcoholic who chose to become an alcoholic himself, I am determined to do my part to break this cycle of dysfunction in my family. Now, as hard as it is for me to admit, I know that Maggie and Chloe will not be perfect. They're going to sin and struggle with their own hurts, habits, and hang-ups, just like you and me. The great news is that unlike many of us here, they will hear about recovering on a daily basis. With things like how to be with your attitude for them in elementary school and life hurts God heals for them in junior high and high school, they will learn and be able to apply the 8 principles early and know that Jesus Christ will always be there for them. I've been blessed in many ways. First, I have a family who specializes in recovery. When I was finally ready to face my alcoholism, I knew right where to go. Second, I am now able to serve on the Celebrate Recovery staff. About 3 years ago, I felt called to enter in the ministry, but I was newly sober and still fighting day by day, so I thought God had gotten this one wrong. But I read in Ephesians chapter 2 that because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace that you have been saved. I felt that I couldn't be in ministry as broken as I was. But as God began to work on me and as I began to get healthier, I was able to take small steps in the right direction. I entered seminary and began looking for a job outside of the restaurant. I'm so thankful that I was able to come on Celebrate Recovery staff about 1.5 years ago. God has used not only my past pain and struggles for his purpose, but also the struggles of my family. I'm honored to be a part of Celebrate Recovery. I love being a part of a group that no matter where you are in your recovery, you can encourage those around you. I love knowing that many of you are experiencing the forgiveness and healing power of Christ as a result of this program. Mostly, I love that by being here, you're saying that you are willing to do whatever it takes to help those in your churches and communities find healing for their hurts, hang-ups, and habits. As it says in 2 Corinthians, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. Thank you for letting me share.